Hi, welcome to EDSC 605. Today we're going to be talking about the literature review, and we'll get started on that. All right, so we're going to be talking about how to write the literature review. As we begin writing the literature review, I want you to keep in mind that we've done a lot of this work already. So the first step was to find relevant publications. You've already turned in your annotated bibliography, but you might find as you begin to write the literature review, you might need one or two more articles that will confirm or compare, contrast some of the themes that you have written. All right. So far there's 5 steps to writing this literature review: search, evaluate, identify, outline, and write. So we're at the writing part, and I just want to kind of go over some of the previous parts to make sure that you have that covered. A good literature review doesn't just summarize sources, it analyzes and synthesizes them and critically evaluates them to give a clear picture of the state of knowledge on the subject, okay? So some things you should have done already is make some list of keywords, creating the keywords related to the research question, include key concepts or variables that you're interested in, list any synonyms or related terms, and if you get discover new keywords, go ahead and write those down as well. You've already searched for relevant resources using the university library and using the databases that we have available. And so you also use the Boolean operators and or not. And then it was important that you read over the abstracts because that helped you to determine if this article was something that was going to assist you with your themes. All right. Then you started to evaluate and select your sources. So some things that you should have asked yourself, and you can still continue to ask yourself, is what was the question or the problem that the author was addressing? What are some of the key concepts and how they were defined? What are some key theories, models, and methods? And does the research use established frameworks or take an innovative approach? What are the results and conclusions of the study? How does the publication relate to other literature in the field? Does it confirm or add to it or challenge the established knowledge? How does the publication contribute to your understanding of the topic? What are some key insights or arguments? What's the strengths and weaknesses of the research? And make sure that the sources are credible. You also want to use landmark studies, major theories in your field, okay? Then we want to identify themes, debates, and gaps, okay? So we want to organize the literature review, its argument and structure, and we have to understand the connections and relationships between the sources that we've read based on our readings and the notes. So we want to look for trends and patterns. Do certain approaches become more or less popular over time? Themes, what questions or concepts reoccur across the literature? Debates, conflicts, and contradictions. Where do the sources disagree? Because that's important to include as well. Pivotal publications. There are influential theories or studies that change the direction of the field. Gaps, what's missing? Are there any weaknesses that need to be addressed? And this will help you work out the structure of your literature review and show how your own research will contribute to it. So there's ways to outline your literature review. We're only doing 4 to 6 pages. Normally literature reviews are 25 to 30 pages. But creating themes helps you to organize the literature. So we can do it chronologically, which is the simplest approach, and it traces back the development of the topic over time. But you want to make sure not to oversimplify this by listing and summarizing the sources in just a generic order. You want to try to analyze the patterns and turning points and key debates that have shaped the direction of the field and give your interpretation of how and why the developments have occurred. The next step is you can use this thematic. You can find some central or reoccurring themes, and you can organize your literature into subsections. Now, this is important because when you organize, we're going to ask that the chapter 2 be put into subsections so that you can see the path in which it takes, and it's organized and it makes sense. And you're going to address the different aspects of the topic. So if you were reviewing literature about inequities in migrant health outcomes, some themes might be healthcare policy, language barriers, cultural attitudes, legal statuses, and economic access, and these become your subheadings. You can do it methodologically, which if you draw on your sources from different disciplines that use a variety of different research methods, then you want to compare the results and conclusions that have come about from the different approaches. An example of that would be looking at the results that have emerged from a qualitative versus a quantitative research. Discuss how the topic has been approached by empirical versus theoretical scholars, and then divide the literature into sociological, historical, cultural sources. You can do it in a theoretical framework, and you can use it to discuss various theories, models, and definition of key concepts. You might argue the relevance of a specific theoretical approach or combine various theoretical concepts to create a framework for your research. Okay, so as we begin to write the literature review, every literature review should have an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. Your introduction should be clearly establish the focus and purpose for the literature review. Next, sorry, that's a duplicate slide, you have the body. And depending on the length of your literature review, you might want to divide the body into subsections and use the subheadings for each theme, time period, or methodological approach. As you write, you want to consider that you're summarizing and synthesizing, giving an overview of main points of sources and combining them into a coherent whole. You want to analyze and interpret. Don't just paraphrase other researchers. Add your own interpretation where it's possible. Discuss the significance of the findings in relationship to the literature as a whole. You want to critically evaluate, mention the strengths and weaknesses of your sources, and you want to write it in a well-structured paragraph using transition word, topic sentence, and drawing on conclusions and comparisons and compare and contrasting. Then finally, you'll have a conclusion and you'll summarize the key findings that you've taken from the literature and emphasize their significance, all right? So what the importance of synthesizing. Synthesizing is not the same as summarizing. Summarizing restates the information in one or more sources without providing new insight or reaching new conclusions. Synthesizing, however, draws on multiple sources to reach a broader conclusion. There are two types of synthesis, explanatory and argumentative. Explanatory seeks to bring sources together to explain a perspective and the reason behind it. Argumentative brings the sources together to make an argument. Both types synthesize involving looking for relationships between sources and drawing on conclusions. To successfully synthesize your sources, you want to begin by grouping your sources by topic and looking for connections. So for an example, if you were researching the pros and cons of encouraging healthy eating in children, you want to separate your sources to find which ones agree and which other ones disagree. When you synthesize, you want to remember not to force relationships between sources if there isn't one. Not all of your sources will complement one another. Do your best to highlight the relationship between the sources in a very clear way, and ignore any outliers in your research, okay? It's important to right, so we're going to go ahead and continue where we left off. And so we were talking about the importance of synthesizing, just making sure that you are grouping your sources by topics and looking for connections. So as we continue to synthesize, we want to make sure that we don't force relationships between sources if there isn't one. Not all of the sources will complement one another. We're going to do our best to highlight the relationships between the sources in a very clear way. And don't ignore any outliers in your research. Not everybody's going to agree, and it's important to include those people in there as well. So here's two examples of synthesis. In this paragraph, the topic was encouraging healthy eating in their children. This paragraph begins with the idea and then drastically shifts to another one. Rather than comparing the sources, the author simply describes their content, and this leads the paragraph to veer into different directions at the end, and it prevents the paragraph from expressing any strong arguments or conclusions. So we have the first sentence: parents are always trying to find ways to encourage healthy eating in their children. Elena Pearl Ben Joseph, a doctor and writer for Kids Health, encourages parents to be role models for their children by not dieting or vocalizing concerns about their body image. All right. Then they go on to quote another person about the first popular diet. Began in 1863, William Banton named it the Banton diet after himself, and it consists of eating fruits, vegetables, meats, and dry wine. Despite the fact that the dieting has been around for over 150 years, parents should not diet because it hinders their children's understanding of healthy eating. So these two concepts don't go together, and it's just a summary of the two, and it doesn't make for a cohesive paragraph that shows a relationship between the two articles. In this next example, the author puts different sources into conversation with one another rather than simply describing the content of the sources in order. The author uses transitions like similarly and makes the relationship between the sources evident. Now here we have the same intro as the previous. Parents are always trying to find ways to encourage healthy eating in their children. Different scientists and educators have different strategies for promoting a well-rounded diet, whilst they're encouraging body positivity in children. Okay, these are the connections, these are the conclusions that the writer has drawn upon. Now the writer goes into talking about the specific authors. David R. Just and Joseph Price suggest in their article, Using Incentives to Encourage Healthy Eating in Children, that children are more likely to eat fruits and vegetables if they are given a reward. In the citation. Similarly, here's the connection. Ellen Pearl Ben Joseph, a doctor and writer for the Kids Health, encourages parents to be role models for their children. She states, and then here's a quotation, a direct quotation, that parents are always dieting or complaining about their body image may foster these same negative feelings in their kids, and trying to keep a positive approach about food. And then she cites Ben Joseph. And then she also goes in to talk about another article written by Martha J. Nipper and Waylin Chan. They support Ben Joseph's suggestion in their article that on parents, barriers, and strategies to promote healthy eating among school-aged children. Nipper and Chan note that parents felt that patience, consistency, educating themselves on proper nutrition, and having more healthy foods available in the home were important strategies when developing healthy eating habits for the children. Another direct quote, and by following some of these ideas, parents can help their children develop healthy eating habits while still maintaining body positivity. And then this is drawing upon a conclusion of comparing these two articles. So again, the synthesis came from taking all of the articles, putting it into a theme of healthy living and positive body image, and finding authors that have that same concept and moving forward with that. All right. So this concludes our session on writing the literature review. You should be writing your literature review right now during weeks 1, 2, and 3, and preparing it for its first draft for your peers to grade you on. And then in week 4, you'll be submitting it to me for me to grade. All right, if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. And thank you.